lucky. They're, yeah, I've got a master's. We've got a master's and doctorate.
Sure. You might be one of the few that know Greek and Hebrew.
Yes.
You know, although there may even be somebody in here that has dabbled a little in that too. In the red shirt. Okay.
It's actually one day.
Okay, yeah, and I remember you talking about there being some potential interest within the congregation, you know, in going into ministry. So.
There is no non-yellow.
Good morning, everyone. If I could grab your attention here, we've got Mr. Frank Kremer from LCMS Missions in St. Louis. He's going to be presenting to us today. He's, as you can see on the screen, he's the mission advocate for our area. And so he's got a table back here behind us with some different information. And he's also got this personal sign-in sheet. If you feel comfortable putting your name and contact information down on it, he would really appreciate it. This is not for any kind of Synod database where now you're going to get 1,000 emails and letters and whatnot, but rather this is just his personal way of liking to be able to stay in touch with people. And so if you're willing to put your stuff down on it, he will, I don't know, send you a text or email or something and see how you're doing and answer any questions you have and so on and so forth. So I'm going to pass that along with our regular sign-in sheet for you to use. All right, you came to hear Frank, so here he is.
Thank you, Pastor. So, as Pastor had said, my name is Frank Kremer. I work for the LCMS. I'm based out of St. Louis. I'm a lifelong Missourian. And I serve as a mission advocate. I'll get a little more into what that means later. But first and foremost, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Pastor for having me here. I had the opportunity to meet Pastor earlier this year on a trip that I had taken down primarily to Tennessee, which is one of the states that I have, but I also had came down here and got to have breakfast with him and learn a little bit more about him and about the church. And that kind of created the opportunity for me to be able to come in and talk to all of you today. So I appreciate you giving your time with me. I know this is normally the Bible study time. And, and also thank you for making church a priority in your life on Sundays. That's always a thing we appreciate. And if at any point while I'm talking today, if there is a question that you might have, feel free to interrupt me. I'll try to answer things as best as I can as I go along and be able to answer that for you. And lastly, as part of my thank you is thank you for the support your church gives to one of our missionary families, the Trump family, Shao and Trump, and his wife Krista that work in Africa. I know that Faith has been supporters of them over the time, and thank you very much for that. We always appreciate our partners in ministry. So what I have listed here is 7 E's. These are 7 things that I hope to do today when I talk to you. Engage, entertain, evangelize, encourage, educate, equip, and entreat. I won't get into definitions right now of that, but that's what I'm hoping to do today, and I'll get to more of that towards the end. So the reason I left this picture up here, none of you guys probably, I won't even ask if anybody knows what this is. So what this is this actually is a dairy farm in a little town of Lockwood, Missouri. It's in the southwest part of Missouri. I was at the church last week in Lockwood, Emmanuel Lutheran. Last week I had given a presentation there like this. And the reason I went ahead and left this up here was as I was kind of reflecting on my time there is this actually is the farm that my Aunt Evelyn grew up on. My Aunt Evelyn was married, she was married into my family. I wasn't directly related to her family, but when I was growing up, I grew up Catholic. And after my Aunt Evelyn, her and my Uncle George got divorced, but my parents maintained a relationship with her. And I always just knew her as my Aunt Evelyn that lived in Springfield, Missouri, and she was a Lutheran. I was a Catholic at the time, she was a Lutheran. That's really all I knew about her. But about a year ago, when I was going to visit Lockwood, I kind of put 2 and 2 together and learned that she was a member of the LCMS, just like I was, or I am, sorry, because I didn't become a Lutheran until 2007. And my Aunt Evelyn died in 2014. And in reflecting upon this, the reason I think about this is because I wish when I would have became a Lutheran that I would have interacted with her and had that opportunity to interact with her about our faith. And I didn't get the opportunity to do that. And I like to include that up here because in my next slide, we get into what exactly is a synod and why do we have one? And what does the word synod mean that we're a part of? Like I said, when I was growing up, I was a Catholic and I just knew of Lutherans, but I didn't know anything about a synod, anything like that. And so when you break down the word synod, basically it comes down to, I can't read Greek, which there's the Greek, there's Latin, and it breaks into 2 parts. Synodus, with the syn part, which is with, meeting, or assembly, hodos, way or journey. And the reason that I show this is basically, essentially, when it comes to synod, we like to think of it as walking together, and walking together in our faith, and also walking together in ministry, which that's a big part of what I'm here to talk to you about. So, as Pastor had mentioned, I work in mission advancement for the Synod. When people think of advancement, sometimes they think, is that just another word for development? As I mentioned, I'm here. I had the 7 E's that I was here to do for you. Encourage, engage, evangelize, entertain, encourage, educate, equip, and treat. Other E's that I'm not here for is I'm not here to extort you. I'm not here to extract anything from you today. I'm just simply here to bring awareness to the work and ministry that our church is doing. And I get to do that in mission advancement as a mission advocate. And what that essentially means is I get to visit, primarily I visit with individuals that are partners with us in ministry and be able to build those relationships with people that support ministry in our church. I also get to meet with pastors like Pastor Mark when I got to connect with him. And as I had said, that gives me the opportunity if it's a good situation to do so and makes sense, I get to come in like this and be able to talk to everybody and share more about what our church is doing out in the world and here stateside. So is anybody familiar with this Bible verse from Paul's letter to the Philippians? I seek the fruit that increases to your credit. And yet we don't really seek the gift, but we seek the fruit. And in this case, in Paul's letter to the Philippians, what this represented was the church in Philippi had actually gathered resources and had sent Paul a gift to help him in the ministry that he was doing. And so, this has kind of become a theme within our work in mission advancement, more seeking the fruit rather than the gift from people. And thinking back to this particular verse, what if the fruit that increased to the credit of the Philippian people were those other people who were saved because they heard the gospel that was preached by Paul? And so, since I'm here representing mission advancement, should we maybe talk about what the mission of our church is? What is the mission of our church, the LCMS? So this here is the mission statement. This was the mission statement of the church. This was created in 1998 at the Synod Convention. And I'm not going to read it all here. It's a lot of words, kind of busy that's going on here. But what I am going to do is break it down a little bit in what our work as a church essentially is here. So who are we? We're the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. That is, all of the Synod are 5,000 plus, probably a little over 5,800 congregations. Depending on who you ask, we're anywhere from, I'd say right about 1.7 million members. And how many missions do we actually have? The mission, and we have a singular mission, is to make known the love of Christ. And that in essence explains all the work that we do in our church in ministry, is to make known the love of Christ. It really boils down to that. I like that it's simple, and that's what we do, whether we're doing work here stateside, whether we're doing work in whatever country that we're serving as missionaries. Everything that we do, that is our primary mission. And we do that with vigor, and we do that by word and deed. And we do that in grateful response to God's grace and empowered by the Holy Spirit through word and sacraments. And the Holy Spirit part is really important, not only in mission advancement to me personally, is that it's not, no matter if anybody wants to, support or be a part of ministry, it's really the Spirit at work. It's the Spirit that's working through all of us, not just in the work that we're doing in mission throughout the world, but also people that want to be a part of that and support that. It's the Spirit at work, and that's an important piece, because whether somebody wants to be a part of ministry or that is not anything that I can control. It's not anything that my department can control in our work that we do, a congregation, whoever it may be. I mean, it really is the Spirit at work, and I like the fact that that's a big part of what we get to focus on in our work, is the Spirit. And then where do we do this work? We do it within our churches, our communities here, all throughout our districts of the Synod, and we also get to do it all throughout the world. So, I mean, that happens, the work that we're doing happens everywhere, and that's It's not just a missionary that goes off to Africa and does work in Africa. There's things happening within our own place here. Within your community, there's probably a lot of things that you do as a congregation to help spread the gospel and make Jesus known to people within your own place here. And so, as I mentioned, our work in the world. Is it the Synod's mission? Is it your congregation's mission? Both those answers is yes. The work that we do is also work that we're doing because of you, because you guys are a part of our Synod. We're all a part of this together. And so it's not just our work in the world, it's your work in the world. And so, like I had mentioned, we do that all around the world, but what I'm going to do, actually first, so what we do also do, along with having the primary mission of the Synod, is we've sort of prioritized, and we have 7 mission priorities. I'm not going to read these, it gets a little busy with the slides, but essentially what we love to do together as Synod, all of us, is church planning, theological education, serve our neighbors, collaborate with our partners, church workers, creating church workers and pastors, Lutheran education, our schools all throughout the Synod, and to support Lutheran families. And this is from the Articles of Incorporation, is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ throughout the world by every means possible. And it kind of explains again, like the mission statement, kind of what the primary focus of our work is. So, as I get started, as I'd mentioned, there's work that's happening all around the world, but what I want to focus on first is our work that's happening within our own backyard here in the United States. What's commonly called, I'll probably say throughout National Mission or Office of National Mission or ONM, if you hear those terms. So, National Mission. What had happened is in 2010, there was a restructuring of our Synod, and we kind of broke out our mission work into 2 broad categories. One is national mission that I'm getting ready to talk about, and then on international mission. So we're going to take a look at kind of the work that's happening here in our own backyard. And God's mission here, within the past, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 years, this has sort of became a bit of the catchphrase for ONM, is there's a lot of important work that's happening all around the world, and I think a lot of people primarily know a lot about that work that's happening with missionaries and such, but God's mission is also here. You sometimes see it at churches. Whenever you leave a church, you see the sign that says you're entering the mission field. There's a lot of mission work that's happening in our own backyard, and there's a lot of ministries that I'm going to briefly cover that we're able to do here in the States. But we have 3 main focuses within National Mission. These are kind of the 3 things that they focus on in working within our church. Serving congregations and schools, and that is serving, not dictating what people should be doing. Partnering with districts, that's partnering, not coercing, and then making disciples for life. So serving congregations and schools, what does that mean? That essentially is serving our over 5,000, close to 6,000 pastors, our just over 5,000 teachers, DCEs, retired workers, retired pastors, as I had mentioned, our almost 2 million members that we have within the church, our congregations, and supporting them in our work. Partnering with districts. If you don't know what a district is, I don't want to assume that everybody knows what a district within the Synod is, but we also work to support our districts in all the work that we do, our different ministries that we do. Does anybody know what district that you are a part of within our Synod? Southern District, correct. I'm going to point this correctly, but I'm not going to say we're here because that's Mississippi. But Alabama, where we're at here. You're part of the Southern District, and we have 35 districts throughout our synod. All of them are geographic except for there are two that I show here. The SELC and the English district, they are non-geographic districts. So they have churches in various areas throughout the country. And also there are some churches in Canada that are part of the LCMS in Ontario and then Quebec as well. And then the last thing I had mentioned here is making disciples for life, which is, this is resources and work that we do to evangelize the lost, retain the faithful, strengthen our congregations, and then plant congregations in schools. And it kind of fall under that particular area. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to touch on, very quickly, there's 18 different ministries that we do within the Office of National Mission. And I'm going to probably touch a little more on some other than others. But what I want you to look for when you see this is, it'll be highlighted, is some of our ministries, there's opportunities for grants, ways that you can receive grants to help in support of mission or ministry. And then also the availability of resources, because those are kind of the two of the main things that we're able to do within National Mission is, because we want to support our districts and our congregations, resources is a big piece that we want to try to provide for people. And then also we get the opportunity, like I mentioned, for grants. So look out for that. You'll see it kind of highlighted as I'm going through some of the particular ministries here briefly. So these first three, our All Nations ministry, this is a recent one that just became formulated. Historically, we had a black ministry, Hispanic ministry. We didn't have an official ministry for it, but we've done a lot of work with different ethnic groups and immigrants. And they consolidated all of those into one ministry, which really, the networking is one of the big pieces, but I would say another piece that's important with our All Nations ministry is we're seeing a lot of opportunities with, especially among different ethnic and immigrant groups, is the opportunity for planting new churches within our synod that are kind of come out of some of these different ethnic groups that we're working with in some of these various ethnicities. And so there's a lot of work that our All Nations ministry is doing with our church planting, which also has kind of went through a more recent, I would say, restructuring in that what we're really trying to focus on with church planting is being able to, we're doing a lot of work with data to kind of identify places where maybe there is not an LCMS congregation currently and kind of looking at the shifts that are happening demographically. So it goes a lot into the data to see where is the opportunity for people that would want to have a congregation, and then being able to provide those resources and working closely with our districts, because we don't want this to be something where our synod is, we're trying to plant new churches and we're not involving the districts in the process, because it's important to have that collaboration and being able to work in conjunction with the districts that have closer work that they're doing with the congregations in the areas themselves within their own district. And so, like I had mentioned, we're not there to dictate, we're not utilizing this to dictate what needs to be done. We're there to support and provide resources for, and then also an opportunity for grants with church plants that are working with our district. And so it kind of creates that opportunity to provide kind of a process to be able to plant new churches, and then potentially, if there's opportunity, be able to actually provide that granting as well, which is important. And then we have also our campus ministry, which this is important, I think, in working with our youth. There's, in this day and age, especially with our different campuses, there's a lot of information young people are getting whenever they go to college. And so being able to have a connection with their church, with our synod while they're at college is important. We have a chapter locator that, we don't have it at every university, but a lot of our universities have a campus ministry. We try to do work with providing resources for those that are engaged in campus ministry. And then also, COVID, the pandemic created a little bit of a problem with this conference that we had done, but we have for the past couple of years been providing a conference that we do for bringing together people that work on campuses to kind of see what's working across the country with people that are actually serving in that capacity on a particular campus. And then also something we hope to create, because we used to do a student conference where we would bring together college students and did a conference at one time. That's one that we're working to hopefully get back into in the future. We have our deaconess ministry, which gets mainly into recruitment and advocacy for that. We have our family ministry, which is one that a lot of people ask the church about a lot, is providing resources to be able to help with resources for Christ-centered homes, and then also resources for various issues that people come across as well, especially in our society in this day and age. A lot of, I'd say, newer things that are coming into play, and resources that we can provide to help people navigate through that and being able to provide that. Big one, as a lot of you probably have seen, is we have our disaster response and training. This is primarily work we do in conjunction with our districts. The Southern District has a large presence in work, given that down in this area, obviously getting into hurricane country and where a lot of different calamities can take place. We really got to see it recently with Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, and the work that our Lutheran early response teams were able to do, our alert teams, if you've ever heard of that. I got to meet one of what's called one of our disaster RSOs, which is a recognized service organization. If you've ever heard of the organization Forged by Fire, which is in Louisiana, got to meet Pastor Paul, who does the work with that, and we work in conjunction not just with our district teams to mobilize whenever we have disasters happen, but we also work with our RSOs that are providing help to people. We do a national conference where we bring together mainly, I'd say, the leaders, what are called the DDRCs, the District Response Coordinators, and bring them together on a national basis. And we also provide resources for kind of the aftercare aspect, because we do a really good job of when something happens, when a hurricane happens, when a flood happens, when a tornado happens. We have teams that are able to jump right on that right away. We have assessment that our director does of disaster response to go down and assess the needs that are there. But one thing that people are asking for more is, how are the resources that we can actually provide a level of care to people in dealing with the trauma that is associated when your home is destroyed or your home is flooded out, having to deal with the financial aspect, the emotional aspect, everything that's associated with that. People want to be able to provide that more, because one of the biggest things that I've noticed as I've started to learn a little bit more about disaster response is while we can provide a lot of physical help and be able to help people in those aspects, we've been able to provide grants and be able to provide monetary resources for people. One of the biggest things that people want whenever a disaster has happened is just somebody that's going to pray with them, somebody that's going to give them a hug. Just help ensure and remind them that everything is going to be okay. And that's a big piece that I've noticed and people are clamoring for that. It's not just us noticing it as a synod in our disaster team, but we have the people that are out there doing training and doing at boots on the ground when these are happening. They're wanting to be able to help people more beyond just, I'm going to muck out your basement and and put up new drywall and do different things, which are important, but being able to provide more than that. And one thing that makes us unique with our disaster response is when a lot of organizations come in after a disaster happens, organizations like the Red Cross and such, they're only there for a short time before they're off to deal with the next disaster. One thing that equips us well with our teams is we're able to be there and help people for as long as it's needed to get them right again. And so we're there for sometimes weeks or months, depending on the disaster that's happened. And we've been able to mobilize with these two hurricanes that came, since they came in such close proximity to one another. We were able to mobilize, and we have a lot of teams that are not just the ones that are in the impacted districts in Florida, Georgia, and in the southeastern district, but we have teams from Missouri, teams from Oklahoma, teams from different states that are able to send teams to help them out. The work that's happening with a lot of the chainsaw work that is happening in Georgia is actually being led by one of our disaster people from Missouri. And so, from the Missouri district, not a person necessarily from Synod, but from the Missouri district. And so when there's a need, they come together, and that's where the work is so important that we're able to do. And we thank all of you in being able to do that, because one thing that we're able to do within disaster response, and what's been helpful, is when these two hurricanes had happened, is we were able to, from a monetary standpoint, do a lot with our initial plan to help out these people that were impacted. And that's because we have gifts that are ongoing that come in from our church and are able to have, and are always, I would say more often than not, what you're almost planning for is the next thing that's going to happen. We get a lot of support in the now, but we also get a lot of support previously that allows us to be good stewards and be able to plan for when something like this happens. Because when Helene first hit, we initially thought Helene was going to be rather minor because it hit an area of the Gulf that wasn't as populated, but then there was the storm. And the storm was really the big part that created a lot of issues as it moved up from the Gulf and moved up through Georgia and into North Carolina, and created a lot worse of a situation than what we maybe initially anticipated.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do you have like central locations where you have supplies and things in the different districts? Because I know when we had a tornado one time, my friend's church, I just happen to have a friend up in Tennessee, that their church was big on helping with disaster relief. And they were like the next day at our house, and they gave us a generator and gas and candles and water, and they brought all this stuff all the way from Tennessee to us. And I have no idea if they didn't do that, we wouldn't, and we were like the center for our entire neighborhood to come and charge their phones and everything else. So is there, I would just like to know if there is central locations and we need to get the word out about them so we can help support them, and also in case there is a disaster that we know who to call, kind of.
Sure. So basically the way they kind of work it, and this is where the district relationship is important that we have with our districts who work in disaster and we work to support them, is when a disaster hits, a lot of times what level of response that we can do depends on proximity. More often than not, what ends up happening is a staging point. It's not each district doesn't have a specific location for like when all disasters happen in their area. It really is, and I'd say it's primarily a congregation that is big enough to handle having teams come in, having volunteers, and coordinating a volunteer effort. So with Hurricane Helene and Milton, in those cases, there's congregations in Florida, in Georgia, in North Carolina that have kind of become staging points that are close to where a lot of times it's being close to where the damage has happened, and then being able to from there provide, that's kind of where it comes from, is being able to create that staging area, because it'll vary from disaster to disaster. Like when we had tornadoes that happened in Little Rock, Arkansas, there was a church in Little Rock that was big enough to support teams that were going to come in and help for the what turned into probably I'd say 6 to 8 week effort of cleanup and things. But that staging is really important because these teams come in and you have to account for their lodging needs and helping them out in that aspect, feeding people, getting hookups because they're coming down with trailers and things like that. So it depends like the where of it, but that's where our coordination with our districts is so important, is being able to find a congregation that's close to where things had happened.
But there's no
Warehouse.
I'm just thinking, yeah, kind of warehouse.
There's no warehouse.
What I'm saying is because you need the trailers, the trucks, the generators, you need kind of something ready to go.
Sure. And
But
that's,
you
yeah.
might have to go elsewhere, but is there any?
Most
anything like
of
that?
those are particular alert teams in a particular district. Those will be arranged at the district level, and it can vary. Sometimes it might be at a congregation, and then they can be ready to go whenever they need to. So, I mean, it varies. It's kind of a varied answer in terms of things, but they have it in particular areas. I'd say if there's ever a time when you would want to know who to contact, certainly you can contact the Synod offices, but I would say also you can reach out to the specific district, to like the Southern District's offices or, whatever the particular district is, to be able to kind of get more information, because it can vary from time to time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yes?
So a lot of the people in here, or some of the people in here, were not here when the tornadoes of April 2011 hit and tore up the Harvest area and some of the Monrovia area. And it was just sprinkled all around North Alabama. There were 5 major tornadoes, but a lot of smaller tornadoes. And Grace Lutheran was one of the major jumping points for clothing, supplies. People just within a few days had so many clothes donated that they had the entire gym at Grace Lutheran was boxes of clothes sorted. And so people could go during the day and replace those clothes that they lost in
That's
the
so
tornado.
good to know. And it's so
Yeah.
good to know to support them and so they're
Mhm.
ready.
And Grace Lutheran also, they have classrooms that they can put people in if they're not running the school at the time. School, everything got put on hold for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, there was a local response to a local, need when something major did happen.
Thank you. So, a couple of other areas that we get into. We do a lot of work with grants. We do a lot of work with that. There's the $1 Million Life Grant that we do that's in conjunction with our life ministry, which there's a lot of March for Lives that happen, a lot of resources and podcasts that we do. And then we do those grants to kind of help out organizations throughout our church that are providing support and ministry to people around pro-life, around life issues and things like that. We have our health ministry that we do, which also provides a network of professionals, but also resources that we can provide for people within our church. I had mentioned earlier recognized service organizations. It's a big thing in disaster response. Organizations like Orphan Grain Train, if you've heard of them, Forged by Fire, there's some other ones with disaster, but then also all of our schools that are not tied directly to a church are considered an RSO. And essentially what an RSO is any organization that's doing work in ministry, it's a process we do for them to become partners with the LCMS. And that partnership kind of gets into, it's organizations that are kind of aligned on a theological level with the Synod. And the biggest thing that I think organizations get out of being an RSO, there's a lot of benefits that kind of come in calling workers and things like that, but the biggest thing they want to be is they want to be partners with the church. And that's important to them. And it's nice that I can, when I'm out talking with people and letting them know about, if somebody asks me about a particular resource, while we do a lot of work as a Synod, we don't do everything. And so being able to actually point people to specific organizations, maybe in their own area where they live, or nationwide or worldwide, that do work. It's a great thing to kind of point people to our partners as well, that are doing a lot of great work. Like with the disasters, Orphan Grain Train's a big one because they provide a lot of supplies. That's a big part of work that they do when disaster strikes. We have our revitalization, which we have resources for congregations to kind of self-assessment tools, what's called our revitality program. We have workshops that we can do to kind of primarily kind of self-directed work. And then we have our school ministry, which gets into our accreditation for all of our Lutheran schools. The Genesis project here is a specific, when a particular area or community is wanting to start a Lutheran school, we can help them through that process. For a minimal fee, we can help them through all the feasibility work and work to actually, because it can be thousands of dollars just to determine if you want to, or if an area is feasible to start a school. And we can kind of help people through that process and kind of utilize a lot of our expertise that we have in the area. And then do some various consulting work and then also leadership development. We have our stewardship ministry, witness and outreach. And I know I'm getting a little bit shorter on time, so I'm going to probably start to move a little quicker through some of these. There's our work that we do in specialized spiritual care, which is support and resources that we provide for chaplaincy, different, like chaplains at hospitals, different resources there. We also have some resources. We have a lot of areas throughout the country where we have people doing prison ministry as well. And so that gets into a little more specialized areas of care outside of kind of your normal congregations and things like that. Worker wellness, which this is an important one that we do with more and more. That's a thing we're trying to provide for our church workers, for our pastors, and also grants that we can provide when church workers are in need. This came out a lot during the pandemic when we had a lot of church workers that were impacted by churches or schools being closed for a time, and helping them financially through our different programs. Also, we have Soldiers of the Cross and Veterans of the Cross, which one involves church workers. The other one is actually for a lot of our retired pastors and helping them. And so there's grants that we provide and work that we provide in that. Worship resources, certainly, that we provide for pastors and anyone within the laity. Our youth ministry, that's a big one coming up this coming year. They do a lot of work throughout every year all the time, but the big thing coming up next year is our National Youth Gathering, where 20 to 25,000 people get together, our youth, and it'll be in New Orleans this next year where it's taking place again. And just a great opportunity to bring together the youth of our church. And it's one of the biggest things that our youth ministry provides, but then they do a lot of other leadership training and have other resources and servant events that they do for our youth and for people that are working with our youth. So that's the national piece that we get into with our, like I mentioned, our God's mission here. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is not directly a part of national mission, but it's certainly happening within the U.S. here, is what's called our Set Apart to Serve initiative. And what this is actually resources that we're working to provide for our laity, for our pastors, for church workers, in helping people to how do we work to get more people involved in church work. One problem that we have been dealing with, a challenge with the church, is that over the past 15 to 20 years, our numbers have dropped in terms of people that are going into church work, especially also people that are going into the seminaries to become pastors. And so this is a thing that we've worked to really look at this issue and working in conjunction, not just with our districts and congregations, but working with our Concordias, our universities, working with our seminaries, kind of a collaborative effort to really, how do we have discussions with people and provide resources to learn, people becoming pastors, when people becoming pastors or church workers, when do you have those discussions? How do you have a discussion with a little kid? How do you have a discussion with an adult? How do you have a discussion with a high schooler? Helping provide those resources, and not necessarily focusing just on Pastor Mark, that he has to be the one to find all the church workers that are, in a particular congregation. How can we have everyone within our church do that? And then also another focus of another thing we also do with Set Apart to Serve is we're looking now, another piece that we're doing is looking at how can we reach out to second career people, because a lot of our pastors, and I've come across this personally as I've met a lot of pastors within my area, is we have a lot of pastors that are coming from other walks of life and becoming pastors. Like, how can we do more of that and providing these resources throughout to anyone with our church, churches like Faith, and any church can be able to have these resources to be able to do it, because this is going to be a thing that's ongoing. It's not something we're going to solve immediately. And then the other main area that I wanted to focus quickly on is our international mission. Most people know about this. This is our missionaries serving throughout the world. There's 3 main initiatives that our Office of International Mission does. The 3 parts of all of the work they do in the different countries that they serve is spreading the gospel, planting Lutheran churches, and showing mercy. And that's with any of the missionaries serving. That's with all the projects that are going on. And if you remember from those 7 mission priorities, these align with several of those different mission priorities that we have as well. And our work happens in international mission in 4 main regions. They happen in Latin America and the Caribbean, Eurasia, Asia, and Africa. Africa is the area where the Trump family is at. Shawan Trump is the regional director for all of our missionaries and the work that's happening in Africa with the missionaries themselves, and also with a lot of the projects that we do. And so that's we try to do work in everywhere throughout the world. There's some areas that we're not able to be, unfortunately, just because of various geopolitical and other reasons. But we have over 100 missionaries that are in areas throughout the world because of people like you, because of being your work in the world. Another area that international mission does is our ministry to the armed forces, which is work that is done to support. This is for serving those who serve. It's primarily supporting our chaplains that are both stateside and throughout the world deployed in areas. It's also programs to be able to support those in active duty and reservists in areas around the country here, and providing levels of support, not just the chaplains themselves, but also programs that we can do with congregations to support our troops, not just the ones that are actively serving, but ones that have served as well, and being able to provide that for people. And this is kind of I mentioned the catchphrase for national mission. This is the big one for national mission, or international mission, is you get to tell them. I do have some information with regards to that, some opportunities, because one thing we get to do, not just the ones that are missionaries, but we have a lot of short-term opportunities that exist, and people that are able to go on short-term type teams, and there's a lot of information and ability to do that in particular areas of the world. I'm not going to get into this just because I know I'm running out of time, but one thing that our Office of International Mission is doing is, this was at the last Synod Convention last year up in Milwaukee, is the creation of what's called a foro. And that's the Spanish word for forum. And essentially what this is meant to be is a collaboration where congregations, pastors, districts, and institutions of the LCMS partner with OIM, our Office of International Mission, in the work that we do to spread the gospel, plant Lutheran churches, and show mercy. And it's kind of a way to bring together, I would say, our stakeholders that are involved in the ministry work that's happening within your church. And because that's, you can lean on a lot of expertise and a lot of work that our whole church is able to provide in helping these areas. The foros have been a successful model that we have done in primarily our Latin American region, and we've been able to, through that Synod resolution, they wanted to expand that to the other regions throughout the world, because it's just been a great way to bring together our stakeholders to help extend the kingdom of God in a particular place. So the foros are focused primarily on countries, but we have broader ones that are involved in the particular regions as well. And so it's a great tool, just any of those opportunities, I think, to bring together the stakeholders has been a really successful model, beyond just a congregation might support a missionary or an individual might support a missionary, is it gives an opportunity to be involved on a deeper level with the work that's happening in a particular area. I always encourage people to look out for our publications that we do. These have a lot of great stories about the work that's happening. Lutheran Witness, the Reporter, and our Lutherans Engage. Lutherans Engage is one that shows a lot of the stories about specific work that's happening in particular areas. But all great resources to be able to find out about the work and kind of hear stories about what specifically is happening, not just around the world, but here in the States as well. KFUO, another great resource. If you're not familiar with, we do have a radio station that can broadcast a lot of information. We have a great podcast called The Coffee Hour, which actually gets into specific stories where they'll talk to a missionary serving in the field. They might talk about programs like Set Apart to Serve and how people got into church work. Various different areas you can do that within that podcast that we do. And it has a reach around the world in over 150 countries, KFUO does. And does a lot of work with Bible studies and, as mentioned here, a lot of different areas. And then, how can you contribute to the mission of our synod? Learn, pray, give, tell, send, go, celebrate. So I mentioned those 7 E's. Engage, were you drawn in? Was your focus held? Did you hear the good news of Jesus? I hope you did. Were you built up? Did you learn something new? Are you prepared to contribute? Were you invited to take action? I didn't know what the word entreat was before I did this, before I first prepared this presentation, but it's essentially another word for invite, to take part. And I just want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come in and speak a little bit about the work that our church is doing. And I will be around for everything, so if there are questions or any sort of observations, feel free to find me as I'm here. I'll be here for the festivities. I encourage you, like I said, there's various information over here that you can grab just about some things about specific ministries, some more broader stuff. And if there's anything that you have a question on, like I said, or if you see that and it prompts a question, feel free to find me. I'm here to serve and here to do whatever you need. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Pastor.
So, hopefully you learned a lot this morning.